Good morning, welcome to Headline Focus, here live on Core Politics with me, Rod Double. A very Halloween and spooky Headline Focus coming up as well, of course, as it's Halloween today. Let's have a look at what's making the political headlines this morning. And it's pretty much dominated by what's been going on in terms of the budget and the fallout and analysis from the various institutions, think tanks that have looked at it, crunched the numbers and had a look at what the real implications are going to be beyond simply the Chancellor Philip Hammond's speech at the dispatch box on Monday. Now, in terms of the politics of it, there's one phrase that is really coming through in the papers as the political tin ear moment, aka the total lack of perspective comment which Philip Hammond made. And that's when he commented and talking about the little extras for schools and giving a little bit more funding for those little extras. Now, little extras has been picked up as the wrong mood, wrong tone in the context of the protests that have happened over school funding and also the realities of the squeeze on education budgets as well for schools. But apart from that, one of the main aspects of this whole budget is what's been called the gamble that Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, has made, and by extension, of course, the government has made, with regards to spending and not cutting down the deficit. So the whole idea of pushing the austerity is over narrative, putting in more investment into public services, and as a result, shifting away from the priority which has been for the Conservatives over the past few years, of course, the cutting the deficit, getting the deficit down, public spending down, balancing the books and managing the public finances properly. Now, why is that important? Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which has been reported as the key centre of this whole argument of the gamble being made, a lot of the reports coming through commenting on the IFS's conclusions on the budget this morning, saying that Philip Hammond has used the windfall that he got, the £13 billion windfall that he got from tax receipts, which was announced a couple of weeks ago. Rather than using that to pay off the deficit, he's used that to fund big spending projects. Now, predominantly that's been on the NHS, but also there was announced some defence spending as well. Those were the two big winners. Largely in other departments, real term spending has remained relatively flat. But the NHS, of course, there was the real spending commitment, which was announced a few months ago, the £20 billion figure. The IFS said this could have eliminated this windfall eliminated the deficit by 2023-24. And the key thing here is by not using that money to pay off the deficit and not using that money to bolster and ensure that there's a blanket, a safety cushion for the public finances. It means that there is no preparation or less preparation if the public finances deteriorate. Now, why might they deteriorate? Well, that thing called Brexit, which is coming around the corner in the next few months, the deal has not been firmed up yet, and there are still many different factors which could mean the economy could deteriorate. Obviously, the worst being no deal, but again, as well, if a deal comes back which isn't as good as people expect, that will have an impact on the economy. And if there isn't that cushion in place for the Chancellor having put that cushion in place, then it could mean the economy is more difficult to manage. Now, why is that important? Well, there's been obviously reports coming out. Standard & Poor, a global ratings agency, has been picked up by The Guardian as predicting a no deal would cause a recession, rising unemployment, tumbling wages, inflation up to 5% and property prices tumbling as well. So that's the real narrative, I think, to take home of this budget is the fact that the windfall's been used to spend on public services and not cut down the deficit, as has been the previous narrative of the government. In terms of other stuff as well, personal allowance will rise to £12,500 from the £11,850 from next April. Higher tax threshold, the income, which people start paying, of course, that 40% rate of tax will go up to £50,000. Currently, it's at £46,350. Now, these are cuts to what's been reported in Sky saying 32 million people will benefit. However, this will benefit the wealthy more, and that's one of the issues coming on to the next story as well. If we have a look at the next story, Labour divisions over these tax cuts, and this is particularly due to the personal tax allowance, as I've just outlined. The idea that they are going to benefit a lot of people, taking more people out of tax, relieving the tax burden on the individuals, but it does benefit the wealthy more, according to the analysis that have been done by many think tanks over the past 48 hours. Now, why is that particularly important? Because as you can see, the Shadow Chancellor Philip Hammond said told Sky News he wouldn't reverse that particular aspect of the budget, so indicating that there is, to some extent, he has some support or at least backs the government in the current proposition to cut those tax burdens. Now, he went on to say the fairest way to do it, if you're changing the allowances fine. That puts more money into some people's pockets and they spend in the economy and it increases demand. He goes on to say the issue isn't about allowances, in other words, these personal tax allowances, it's about a fair taxation system. But why is that particularly important? Because his point is that through relieving the personal tax allowances, you're injecting more demand into the economy, which is, of course, a good thing and which should be fostered. However, you are following this narrative of tax breaks which are going to benefit the wealthy more than they're going to benefit the poor. Whilst they are going to benefit a large number of people, they are going to benefit wealthy more. That's not necessarily what you would expect from a Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell style government, or at least government proposition. Now, that has created this really interesting element which is going on in the Labour Party at the moment, where centrist, or more what's seen as traditionally more Blairite politicians, people like Yvette Cooper, David Lammy, are actually criticising the more left-wing, or seen as more left-wing aspects of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, over the support of the budget and it being too supportive of the Conservative Party policy. Yvette Cooper quoted as saying, "This is wrong, I cannot support it." David Lammy saying we should not be supporting tax cuts that disproportionately help the wealthy. And even Shadow Foreign Secretary Amy Thornby was criticising the income tax policy, saying tax cuts for the rich. Andy Burnham as well, one of the Metro mayors, saying he was at a loss to understand why Mr McDonnell was backing the policy. Now, John McDonnell was actually in the city this morning. I think he's answering some questions at Bloomberg, particularly in terms of the budget announcements. So that potentially will be some points to clarify, and maybe John McDonnell will want to clarify his position in its entirety then, so look out for that. But in terms of the politics of this, certainly good news for Theresa May going into Prime Minister's questions. Some weight behind that in terms of what she can throw at the Labour Party in terms of the budget, when the inevitable scrutiny and the questions come up from Jeremy Corbyn over some of the announcements. Finally, one more story then. Now, you may have remembered I covered this, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, in terms of EU clearing and the importance of the UK clearing infrastructures post-Brexit, a very important revenue generator for the UK economy, but also a very big part of the city. EU banks and companies will be able to access the UK clearinghouses for a limited time in case of a no-Brexit deal. This has been confirmed by a Vice President of the European Commission. This is following reported lobbying from companies to ensure that there is mechanisms in place to allow continuity, or at least some stability, over the issues of clearinghouses and what's going to happen to clearing. A lot of, the majority of EU-denominated currency clearing happens, of course, in the City of London, something which is reported as being potentially under threat if there isn't a good deal in terms of Brexit. There is some caveats, according to this report, though, which I should pick up on, which is this continued access to UK clearinghouses isn't forever. There is no indication of the actual length of time that this continued access for continental companies can continue for. And also, it's as long as the UK stays close to Brussels regulatory and supervisory standards. Now, of course, while close alignment is what the UK government seeks at the start of the Brexit process, divergence, at least in terms of some sectors and some industries, is very much the ambition and on the cards. So whether that will have implications for the UK clearing system in the next years to come or months to come after Brexit, that we'll have to wait and see. But certainly for the moment, indications are that this very big concern that has been UK clearing and the impact of Brexit on the EU's nominated clearing processes in the City of London is, at least at this moment, seemingly relatively safe in terms of a no deal, at least for the short term, that is. That's pretty much it for today. You're up to date. Don't forget you can find all the latest on what we're doing here on Core Politics on our Facebook page and Twitter right here. If you want to talk about something which we've covered, or indeed something we haven't covered going on today, comment section box is below, or tweet me. I'm of course at RJH. Have a fantastic Halloween. See you again at the end of the week on Friday to give you your latest roundup of what's going on.